Well, it being 4:30, I call to order the meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee. The first, Steve Rafferty has family issues he's working on today. The first item is Chuck Martinson, who's going to give us an update on Falmouth's aquaculture plan.
You might have to turn it on. On the side.
Beware.
Steve. I'll be going after him. He didn't put me in the agenda for some reason.
Can't afford
I'm up
batteries.
right after when he wraps up.
What are you talking about?
The oysters,
For how long?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know, 15 maybe.
Good evening.
Oh, nobody told me.
My name's Chuck Martinson. I'm the Deputy
Yeah,
Director of Marine and Environment. Thank you so much for inviting me this evening to give an update on the aquaculture plan. What I figured we'd kind of do is this is a final draft of a final report. It doesn't say final draft on it, but there are some minor modifications we're going to be working on, but I did want to kind of get that out to the committee. So that was emailed over to everyone. It's voluminous. It's probably 40 or 50 pages, so I didn't want to cut down any more trees than we needed to. But what I'm going to do this evening is go through some of the highlights of where we're at and kind of looking forward. Just as to frame this, I just kind of get everyone on the same page in the audience and on the board. The town obviously looked at a number of different alternatives or additions to sewering, shellfish being one of them. That was what I was tasked with, was kind of running that piece of it. This program's been going on for some time. We'll get into the timeline of things. As of late, the town meeting had voted $450,000 for the completion of a full-scale implementation of the aquaculture / propagation program for the town of Falmouth. That's a mix of both public and private fisheries uses. Prior to the funding going out, we had gone out and done a kind of a first phase glance at the areas and kind of looked at how they would pair up. Before this funding, we did the 3 initial test sites, which have been very productive. I know Tom's going to be speaking a little bit on that. They're producing 1.3, 1.4 million oysters a year, far exceeding the goals that we look at and really some of the standards in the industry. Before we got moving on the funding through town meeting, I really wanted to kind of do a public outreach and get out into the public's, the public spaces before we started moving forward with the actual permitting. I was pointed to this program that MIT holds from our liaison who deals with all the sustainability in the town of Falmouth. And she pointed me over to MIT's program, and we applied to MIT to their master's program to have 2 of their an MBA student assigned to the program. It was, I got to say, I got up there and I wasn't expecting the competition that we had. We were competing against Colgate Palmolive. We were competing against, the Boston Red Sox, Bain Capital, some real heavy hitters. I walked out of there and I tried to handle it with humor. I said, the people that got their business degrees down the road at Suffolk now come back here to get their problems solved. And I think a mix of humor and, more importantly, the interest in the program really drew a number of students' interest and piqued a number of students' interest to kind of jump from the private side to the public-private side and work on this program. We attracted about 4 students. We ended up with Achint and John, who had both applied, and they were the lucky 2 that we got. There were other ones who reached to us afterward that did not get the placement. But as you can see, both of these 2 gentlemen that worked with us had their own private equity, med tech, logistical supply chain stuff from the military. Now they're wrapping up their MBA at MIT and pursuing also a sustainability certificate. So we were really able to fuse some on-the-ground, boots on the ground with some really high-level planning. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole program, but I thought this would be a good kickoff to kind of, explain where we're at. This is roughly the outline of the work that they did. We basically did an overview of the leasing, reviewed the support of the program in the town, both from a financial and a permitting standpoint. We discussed the Eel River projects, and then the MIT folks started engaging members of the public. It was great to have the MIT folks doing this because it really was a third party that was doing the engagement. So, if you go to someone and ask them how you're doing, they're probably going to say you're doing usually pretty well. But if we could have a third party do that, it really adds a lot of credibility. So we had them do private engagements, and we worked through a rubric for selecting new growers and a timeline for the expansion. Just to kind of review where Falmouth is at, back in 2011, we did some trial runs with growing oysters, and proceeded up to where we are today with 2025, where we have the 3 test pilots, and we're leaning forward now with the funding. We have gone out and selected the use of science wares to work with us to permit up anywhere upwards of approximately 80 different farms. These, again, are a mix of both public and private farms. What I'm really here to tell you about today is kind of what we're looking at for the next 6 or 8 weeks. And where that is we've engaged science wares. We are having weekly meetings with science wares, and we're trying to thread that needle to figure out if we're going to need to file a full direct environmental impact report, or if it can be handled under an E&F, which would be much less labor intensive and could allow us more resources on the back end. Some of the things that we're also addressing are the functional pieces of getting out there to survey. We're building up survey rafts. We got some additional funding outside of this for about $25,000 to design a survey raft, which can both survey and process surveys and photograph and do that real integrated stuff that we've done before on the first sites, so that we can process areas quickly and not get held up on the kind of data processing from the sampling perspective. That will, however, be driven. How much of that takes place will be driven by what we hear back from the regulators. We will be opening discussions up with them probably in a week or two. As far as the trajectory of where things are at, I think that we're looking at, I want to see everything in my end permitted at once, but I don't think the rollout is something that we can do all at once. But I think we want to permit it at once and then extend those permits out. I would like it if we tackled it and ripped off this Band-Aid at once and did it all together and not piecemeal it through. So that will likely be our strategy moving forward. Just to kind of review how things work, this is self-explanatory, but eventually, we've got multiple kind of ways that the shellfish work their way through this program, and this kind of lends to that. As far as how many sites exactly we're going to have, we're not going to know those numbers yet until we actually get out there and do those final surveys to see where we're going to be able to put these sites, where we have standing crops of shellfish that are not going to exceed certain triggers. But what we are also going to be looking at is, looking at areas where, say, farms exist now, but they're not as productive as they could be, and trying to talk about building up the productivity on farms that also exist as well, that are already permitted. My hope would be to get back in front of this group again in 3 or 4 months to kind of, sometimes I go maybe every year or every 9 months until I present. I can click that up a little bit as we're moving through this, because I really think it's a critical time for me to be hearing from the Water Quality Management Committee. The committee has been extremely supportive through the life of this, and now that we're we're up to bat, we want to hear from from the captains here. So. And what I thought would be good, and Steve and I had talked, Tom and I had talked, Tom was going to jump into a little bit of the more acute stuff of how things went this year with the trial farms. So first, I think maybe before Tom gets up, I'd just like to take any questions and probably if it works well, probably try to do a 3 to 4 month check back. And just as things are going on, kind of fill in the group where we're at and keep the public as well informed.
Any questions from the committee? Ken?
Are there distribution in space? Do you have a map or anything?
Sure. I can forward some of those maps over. Those were initial first run maps that we went out and we did, low level grabs. So, if it was an area that was, say 200 feet by 500 feet, we might go in there and do 7 or 8 grabs. We can get you all of that data and those maps as well, absolutely. That shows the 10,000 foot view down. There might be some additions to those, but those are, pretty inclusive. I'd say 80% of what's there will be the outline that we'll be working from. We might find some stuff when we're out sampling where if we shift things a few, different ways, it might work better in some areas. But that I will get you that. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Sure.
First of all, I'd say, outstanding initiative to get MIT Sloan involved in this project. That took a lot of, wow, let's go fight for this, and you got it. Fantastic. Well done. Do you have a feel for, Chuck, how much potential acreage expansion we could have? I know there's, from Tom's reports and yours previous, a lot of limitations on where you can put these things.
Right.
Any feel for how much growth opportunity we have in Falmouth?
Sure, that's a great question. So the range I would say is somewhere between 80 acres and upwards of maybe 140 acres.
And how many acres are you at now?
Town-wide, I don't have the number in front of me.
In other words, you're talking about 10% more, doubling?
More than
times 10, or
I would say a magnitude of where we're at now. Probably a magnitude. I'm not going to do the numbers right off my head. I would say more than quadrupling what we have now. Okay. What is important? So that was a great question actually as well. When we initially looked at what we could use for areas, we were thinking in the terms of adult shellfish going to a market, and there are constraints that we have, classification of shellfish areas being the largest one. The state classifies these areas in different ways, and there's some areas that are open part of the year, and there's some areas that are closed all the time, and there's some areas that are open all the time. You get that whole range. Within that, there are certain shellfish that can be harvested in those areas even if they are closed, one of which are scallops, okay? So to answer your question, we're also looking at other types of shellfish beyond just oysters. We're looking at multi-species, the town increasing how much cohogs we're putting out. We overwintered scallops in Falmouth Harbor this winter, about 20,000 animals. Got them up to second year. They're in Great Pond right now, trying to pull them through a full second year, looking at those types of things, which we've never really been able to do before. So before it was more restrictive when we were just thinking about utilizing adult oysters. Now we can possibly use, first year oysters in areas that would not be able to go to growth, and then move them to areas where they could be at grow out, and we could have much more flex in our program. So great question.
I'm set.
No? John?
Tom, I'm John.
I guess, is there a Goldilocks zone when you expand the program till you have too many oysters being produced and you're flooding the local markets?
Sure.
And the price goes down, or is that not a concern?
So yeah, it's another great question. Just for perspective, there's 2 large providers of oyster seed in New England, and each one of them does about 500 million oysters that they produce each year. So think of the magnitude. So you're looking about it, say just those 2 companies are providing 1 billion seed. So when you're looking at just oysters and a billion seed, ours is just a blip on the radar. When you will notice it is when we dump it. If we were to dump oysters, which we did for a while, on a public market, and then we would allow it to be harvested, you would see pulses, starts and fits, which would affect local markets. If you can provide those oysters throughout the year, you will have no issue whatsoever. So great question. I think it does require some ramping up. The ramping up is also in providing the materials. It's also getting the markets able to move into those, spread out and be able to make the sales. But there's, when you look at, and that's just two. You're probably looking at like 1.6 billion a year that are actually put out. So, it's really inconsequential.
Mike? You have to go up and introduce yourself.
Former neighbor.
I'm Michael McGrath. I'm a retired civil engineer. And when I think about oysters, my understanding is they grow on a hard surface. And I was thinking that maybe the thing to do is, if they're short of areas, they could go out and go underneath piers. So I don't know enough about the oysters, but I know there's an awful lot of piers out there, and there may be some old established piers that you could easily do this with. So,
Thank you.
just a suggestion.
Any other questions from the audience? So you want to have Tom?
Sure.
come up?
Yeah, Tom. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right, Chuck's talk opened with the phrase nitrogen attenuation, and if you notice the very last box on the last slide he shared with you, nitrogen removed from the system, and that, of course, is the main reason the Water Quality Committee is interested in this project. And these systems there have been extremely successful at removing nitrogen. The first 2 years I put down to sort of the learning years. It's been actually running for 5 years. It started with the pilot project off Washburn's Island in 2020. Some of you remember something called COVID. Restaurants closed, no market for oysters, so the system, the project failed that year. But since then, there was a 50% gain in productivity, number of animals. The second to third years, and then the third to fourth year, there was another 50% increase. They had 2.5 times as many oysters. The very best year was 1920. Excuse me, I'm way off by a century. 2023, and then last year it fell just a little bit to 1.3 or 4 million oysters. The year before it was 1.5 million oysters. I'm not so concerned today with the actual number of the oysters, other than telling you that it's a tremendous success. But you can see here, and this includes the 2 not so good years and the last 2 really good years, and this is per acre. This is only for an acre of what's called 40,000 square feet of floating bags. 39,000 live weight animals harvested, and the nitrogen extracted has been analyzed at 0.3% of the harvest weight, is 117 kilograms of nitrogen. 117 kilograms of nitrogen. Put that in context. That's over 5,000 pounds of 5-10-5 lawn fertilizer. And I don't know how many gallons of urine. I was hoping our people here could do it, no pun intended, on the fly and tell me right away how many gallons of urine we were talking about. But anyway, it's a very, very large amount of nitrogen. And my interest was in how we might value this nitrogen on a dollar basis, because everybody wants to know how much is it going to cost and why is it worth pursuing and everything else. And so I apologize for this table, because it's not the most rigorous analysis out there, because I've had to look at several different things in several different ways and make some assumptions. But the nice starting point is the Cape Cod Commission, you can see in the fourth line there, the average nitrogen discharge from a single-family house, I don't know what exactly the average Cape Cod house looks like, is 4.5 kilograms a year. So now the nitrogen sequestered by an acre of oysters in Eel River is the equivalent of 26, the nitrogen emitted by 26 single standard issue, whatever you want to call them, average houses on Cape Cod, which is pretty amazing. The drawback is, this is like putting a Band-Aid or a tourniquet on someone that's still being slashed by someone attacking them, because the nitrogen, in large part, has already done its damage to the ecosystem, right? We already have algal blooms and everything wrong, but we are capturing that nitrogen and getting it out. Oh, thank you. Okay, I guess, is this on? Is it working? Okay. Where was I? Oh, the nitrogen has already been released into the system. And of course, we would like to get the nitrogen before it gets into the system. So for the purpose of this analysis, I wanted to see what it might cost to intercept the equivalent amount of nitrogen at the household. And the simplest approach I've taken is urine diversion. 1 cubic per household. That's why I put in $80 there. 1 cubic per household, 26 houses is $2,100, $2,088 for an acre of oysters. On the other hand, if you're going to put in an IA, an alternative septic system, the numbers are all over the place. 25,000 to 82,000 were quotes I've seen in the past year for people putting in IAs. I went sort of middle of the road with $45,000 per installation, and suddenly that acre of oysters has collected over $1 million worth of nitrogen. And the important thing, which Chuck hasn't emphasized yet, people are making a living off of this. Our oyster growers are doing quite well. They're producing hundreds of thousands of oysters per contractor per year. Now, if we go beyond IAs and look at installing conventional sewers, Falmouth was very lucky several years ago with the Little Pond project. Houses were very close together on small lots. The collection cost per consumer was relatively low, and I don't know the exact number, Amy, because it came in somewhere around $20,000 per household, and there we're talking about $500,000. But now if we look at Great Pond Phase 1 at $73,000 per household, and again, that can be, you don't like that number.
Seems high.
I mean, nothing's exact. That's why I said
Isn't it more like
I was taking a
56,000?
flyer here, but just to put it in context, suddenly we're looking at $2 million worth of nitrogen trapped by these oysters, by 1 acre of oysters. And if we look at Mashpee has launched a very ambitious, brand new plant, and I think right now, I don't know what this year's number is, $160 million last year, and that works out to $94,000 per house. But that's an upfront capital cost. As they add residences to their system, the cost per residence will go down, but that puts the value of an acre of oysters at $2.5 million. And Barnstable announced a 30-year, $1.5 billion project, major upgrades all around, and I promise you 30 years from now they will have spent a lot more than $1.4 billion. But if you plug that in to their present 12,000 houses they're planning on servicing with that, it works out to $117,000 per single family resident, or the oysters are trapping nitrogen that potentially would be worth $3 million. And why am I doing this analysis? Chuck has pointed out that we're trying to expand the system. The system that works here in Falmouth is floating bags. They work beautifully, but for them to really work and for it to really pay off for the town of Falmouth, we've got to expand the spatial extent of these. We can't really go vertical. We have to go area-wise with them. And one of the things I would like to be pointing out to people of Falmouth, because some property owners, some water users, and other people are gonna say, well, why are we turning over the surface of Falmouth's coastal embayments to oyster production? And this is, I think, just another way of thinking about it. Now, again, my numbers, my analysis is not absolute, and every town's project is different. And even projects within the same town are quite different, as I'm sure Andy can tell you very quickly, become quite different. And I'll stop there. I've sort of put all my oysters in one basket, I guess we could. Questions from the committee first.
John?
Where are we starting?
I'm going the other way this time, John.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, what jurisdiction do homeowners who live on the water have in terms of voicing their opinion against this and actually having a voting block against it? Is that a concern that the boaters and the homeowners are going to sort of veto this?
Yes, we have occasionally run into buzzsaws of opposition, not specifically on aquaculture, but other situations in town going back 50 years to the sewer plant that was going to be, the treatment plant that was going to be built on Fay Road, which went all the way through to finally a town-wide referendum and then failed. So there's opposition. There was a big ongoing dispute in Mashpee for quite a while over commercial shellfishermen that just wanted to have a few racks out in one of the bays over there, and the neighbors finally made it so bad that he gave up.
But it's on town property. The water, the coastline where they do this is the town?
It's public property in Massachusetts, yeah, if it's navigable water. And I think if you could float a canoe, we'll get to you in a minute, Mike, or?
Mike, I want to go through the committee first.
I just want to say that low water belongs to the public, and generally the upland owner owns got to low water.
Thank you.
Good point.
Are you, John?
What's that?
Ed?
No, that's great stuff.
Ken?
So I'm just curious, this goes back to my initial question to Chuck, is exactly what % of the pond area we're talking about with this proposed expansion?
We've had several pie in the sky discussions about what it could be versus what it might be. And I'm thinking maybe tens of acres,
So not
maybe 50 acres at the most, I'm guessing. I don't know, Chuck, you're not shaking your head at me, but
A little bit more than that.
a little more, okay. So,
We're not talking perfect.
Are you proposing areas that are significantly in excess of the maps that Chuck showed a year or so ago?
No, not at all.
okay. That's
You just
No, those maps that
proposing,
we showed a couple of years ago are the same maps that we're working off of. We have worked through that exercise.
gotcha.
There might be, as I said,
that's what I thought.
10% difference, 15% difference.
So you're just talking about
but
going
that's-
from what it is right now to filling out those areas?
Correct, yep. Yeah,
Oh.
and those are, that's best case scenario, and we all know right now that we're gonna hit triggers in there that are not gonna meet the standards to be open, to be used as shellfish. And to answer your question, just not to jump around, I just wanted to clarify the one question you had. This will all go through the permitting process, whether it's what permitting process it's gonna go through is kind of what's in question. Either way, there is notification to neighbors and abutters, and they are able to present information to the Board of Selectmen, the Conservation Commission, any number of Division of Marine Fisheries, any number of agencies that weigh in on it will take public comment from the neighbors. So there is absolutely the ability for them to comment on it. No different than if you were putting a dock in your yard and you had to notify your neighbors. So.
And I'm going to ask if there are any questions from the audience, but I'd remind the audience that if you ask questions that I subjectively deem to be irrelevant, your chances of asking questions on items that may be more important later in the agenda will be reduced. Are there any questions from the audience?
More comments more than
who
questions.
you are, Matt?
Matthew Hanley from Thomas Landers Road. I grew up as a fisherman. I used to cohog in Walkwhite Bay, so this project has a lot of great appreciation for me because with projects, this graph is kind of basic, but there's always hidden costs and there's always hidden benefits. And some of the benefits here is the oysters are pulling out nitrogen just from their process of filter feeding. But it's my understanding that their waste gets into the bottom, I guess we call it soil or the bottom sediment. And that bacteria also has a denitrifying aspect. And like Tom said, we're supporting our local fishermen and stuff like that. It's become very, very hard to support a family here. And so these affordable jobs, like these lower hanging fruit jobs, like being a a fisherman here in Falmouth, that's a hidden benefit. So I'm happy to see this. And there's some other benefits, like, there's been talks about the ability for these oyster beds to reduce wave action, which would reduce coastal erosion and stuff like that. So I think the town of Falmouth, by going forward with this, all the great work that Chuck Martinson's doing, the benefits are just astronomical when you take a serious look at this. So I'm very happy about this.
Thanks, man.
Malcolm Donald. Tom,
Yes.
Am I correct in calculating that the Gray Pond Sewer Project is 915 times as expensive as your diversion?
Well, Amy was kind of grimacing when I came out with this $71,000.
Yeah, I get 57,000.
Can you?
Malcolm, that's really not on the subject of shellfish.
Well, I just looking
It's
at his
relevant in
figures.
other contexts, but I don't,
Oh,
I don't think we have the data to back it up here. Anybody else from the audience? Hilda?
Hilda Menge, Precinct 8. Could we get the same maps that you will be getting from Chuck?
Yeah, and they're public knowledge.
They're public. I'm
Chuck specifically.
I'm
Yes.
sure Chuck and
I would
Kristen
love to
know.
get them.
They're on the website.
They're on the
They're on our website.
They're not changed at all.
No.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Chuck and
All right.
Tom.
Thank you. Hold on.
Next is Michael McGrath, who's going to talk about nitrogen attenuation.
Let me get rid of this. I don't know how this new one. I don't have a slide. You don't have a slide, so, all right.
You don't have to worry about it.
Good luck. I'll leave this up here just in case they want you to use it.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a retired civil engineer, and I built the first single-family residence denitrifying septic system in Massachusetts history, and boy, was I punished. But I also did some other things. I helped with two others, invent Micro C. It's an organic carbon for denitrification. On most plants over 10,000 gallons, you have to add a carbon after you convert the nitrogen
That's phase one.
from organic and ammonia to nitrate, then you add a carbon. And when I first started, they were using methanol, which is a poison, a carcinogen, explosive, and you can't touch it, you can't breathe it. If you spill it outside the plant, it's a hazardous waste. But only in wastewater would we use the old techniques. I've described DEP as having the finest grasp on 1920 science. I did leave you copies of some reports. The reason I did that was I am never going to do another RUC system. I've asked them to take it off the website. And the reason that I gave you the report is the total nitrogen that we measured in several residential systems was 72.5 milligrams per liter. I know that the Cape Cod Commission has published 50, and it seems to have taken on a life of its own, but I also gave you a report of the RUC CFT system, and we found the raw total nitrogen to be 70. So I want to make sure you know that. And because that, to me, is important. The reason I also came is that when I looked at the original maps that were published a little while ago by the Department of Environmental Protection, it showed areas that I thought were way too far from the estuary to actually affect the estuary. According to the Chesapeake, there's a regional planning agency equivalent to the Cape Cod Commission. They actually have a formula that says from a septic system measured downstream in 100 meters, you lose 60%. What's going on here is that soils are textured. There's a lot of bacteria in a path, and so there's alternating areas of aerobic conditions and anaerobic conditions. So there is attenuation. So when I look at the maps that DEP has published, they're basically talking about extending these IA systems to large areas. And my point is that you don't need to do that. And Ivan Valiela actually wrote a paper. I only have a cell phone, and I can't seem to download his paper from the MBL website. But he did do a paper, you know, it's been a long time. Now, since then, they've changed the plumbing code, so the distance of attenuation may be longer. Now, if you look in one of my reports, it talks about the RUC filters sometimes get colder, but once they're established, the bacteria still do the work. They do the work at a slower rate. And so the point of me saying that is that some people may say that Chesapeake has got different soil temperatures, but guess what? It's still going to attenuate. Maybe instead of 100 meters, it might be 120. I did send you an opinion where I basically said that you don't need to worry about some of the nitrogen that is showing up on this best available measures maps. The perfect example is that if there's a molecule that's in the water, it reaches the water table, in a year it's going to go about a football field. At the same time, it's going to drop 2 feet. So if you picture some of these areas, the bottom line is by the time it reaches some of the estuaries, if there's a long distance to the estuary, it may be below the bottom. And there are several papers about how much nitrogen is removed when in the subterranean groundwater underneath an estuary. So my point is attenuation exists. And the reason I've done this is that my bottom line is that if you go up to and drive Boxbury Hill Road, Hatchfield Road, and some of the other areas that are far north, and by some of this guidance that's coming out of DEP, they have to build these very expensive systems. It's not right, it's not fair, it's actually, in my mind, discriminatory. So I urge you to basically, when you do these studies, estuary by estuary, please figure out some kind of attenuation. And as I said, it's not just me. As I said, the Chesapeake has identified it. And as I've clearly identified, total nitrogen concentration is much different because of the plumbing code. And it's actually referenced in one of the reports where I talk about how I started out at an older system, and then when I built the newer system, there was much more nitrogen. So I hope that I've been trying to help. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have concerning what I've just talked about.
Ken? Questions from the committee? Ken?
No.
Ed?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, Mike. Do you have a feel for, Cape Cod has a lot of sandy soil. How much does that affect it versus Chesapeake, which might have more organic in it? Is that another factor that has to be considered in the concept?
If you read the Chesapeake report, they identified it by geological areas. And the number I'm using is specifically identified to be within a coastal outwash plain. So most people think of the coastal outwash plain as one bed of sand, but in reality, the glaciers grew and receded, so they were melting events, shall we say, and so I've seen them in some of the test pits that there's actually discrete layers. The texture change is very minor, it's hard to see, but I believe that's why there's the attenuation in the groundwater, because there are very small texture changes. And there are a few places where the sands are one big blob, but in doing test pits, I didn't run across that as often as you might think.
John? Sal?
Yeah, Mike, these are really good points, but we're in a game where we don't make the rules. We have to figure out how to convince the state to decide, based on some kind of evidence, that their model is wrong. I mean, all of the watershed models on the Cape, of what I've seen where there's no surface water involved, have extremely low attenuation. And how do we get the word out that...
Well, I'll be blunt. DEP threatened me because I sent them a copy of what I sent you.
Okay.
And they called me and said if I ever said that again in public or presented this to you, they would punish me. So I look at it as they have somehow given themselves a crown and they're dictating to you.
Right.
Well, there's enough scientists down here to overcome the bureaucratic regulatory science. So that's what you have to present. And the fact that I was threatened, the legislators and that represent this area ought to say, people should be rebuked, because no matter what, I've done a lot for, I'm sorry, I'm getting.
Okay, but that is a concern on our part, because we have to work within a pretty rigid framework that's laid out by the higher ups.
Well, the others, ding dong, they're wrong. They've had this report since 2009, and they're still going along saying it's 50 milligrams per liter. Hello, you ought to look at the derivation of biochemical oxygen demand. Look at how it came up with. It's from after World War I, the British measured how much oxygen was demanded in order to make it look like it was unpolluted water. And they come up with a value. And then what are we going to call this constituent? Well, the average time for rivers to drain into the English Channel is 5 days. So now it becomes 5 days BOD. Hello, why do we use a constituent that's used in the English Channel and saltwater when we're discharging stuff into the ground? We should be measuring total organic carbon and total inorganic carbon. Those tests are a fraction of the cost. They can be done anytime. Now, a long time ago, I was operating training.
Mike, we've got to keep moving along.
All right, I'm sorry. I just want to say I was on operating training, and you could only do those BOD tests certain days of the week, and they're very expensive.
Yes.
So,
No questions.
Thank you, Mike. Next item is Amy. On the public outreach initiatives for the Great Pond Sewer Project Phase 1.
So I'm assuming that this mic was only out here because you weren't standing next to this mic, and I'm going to turn this off. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Tom was wandering. Tom was wandering. Tom was walking around. That's why he gave me a hand mic to kill me.
What's that? Oh. I don't need another one of those. All right. All right. Well, thank you for the chance to talk about the Great Pond Project. I'm Amy Lowell. I'm the wastewater superintendent, and I heard the title in your agenda is specifically public communication. I just thought I would take the chance to do a bit of an update as well. But Ed Jalowick has talked in several of the Water Quality Management Committee meetings about how more public communication is appropriate and is needed at this time. So we're gonna focus on that a bit in the presentation. The project status, as you know, is that town meeting voted the appropriation for the project, and in May, town voted to fund the project. So we're moving forward, which is terrific. I did want to update you on one final design change, which is that there is no lift station or gravity sewer now in Falmouth Port. The Falmouth Port buildings will all be served by grinder pumps. And this decision was made because it reduces the cost of the project by about $2 million, by more than $2 million, which reduces the betterment for all. So that is a change that you may notice when you look at some of these figures. So a reminder about the project. The black boundary is the collection system area, the expanded collection system area for this project. There is now one lift station as part of this project, which will be at the north end of the Augusta parcel, which extends between T-Ticket Highway and Brick Kiln Road. The lift station will be up there at the north end of the parcel. There will be a dual force mains to convey wastewater from the lift station up to the plant. One of the reasons that I was, I didn't know how you came up with the numbers, but one of the reasons I was sort of shaking my head about the cost number is that a significant portion of the cost of this project is will benefit future sewer projects. Right. So that lift station and that dual force main will both be used by future projects. So it just it affects the cost distribution when it's presented that way. The sewer service area, this is just zooming in on this service area a bit. It's approximately 600 parcels. The number of sewer equivalent units is to be determined based on the betterment policy. This is a draft map of the sewer connection types.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so why aren't those two numbers the same, I guess is my question.
So that's a good question. Sewer equivalent units are, it's a betterment term. So a single family residential unit, much of this property, many of the parcels in this area are single family residential homes, which all contribute roughly the same amount of wastewater flow to the wastewater system and approximately the same, roughly the same nitrogen load. But some of the parcels are multifamily or commercial, and contribute more flow and more nitrogen load. So the betterment will be distributed not based on parcel, it would be based on sewer equivalent units. I think you already knew that. You're helping me.
Well, I didn't entirely understand it, to be honest.
Okay,
and the number I heard was there's approximately 800 SCUs.
Right. Yeah, well, I'll talk more about that a little bit more, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, in simple terms, if you may produce twice as much flow as the average household,
then maybe
you are 2 SCUs.
Right.
Is it done relatively scientifically, or is it 50% politics?
So let me keep going, and I'll talk more about that. You can ask. Why don't you ask more questions about it at the end if you want to? But there's quite a bit in this presentation about that. So this is a first draft of a map of sewer connection types, and I know that there are some errors on this map. So I'm just showing you that there will be a map like this that shows what's in green here will connect to the sewer by gravity, and what's in tan or brown will connect to the sewer with grinder pumps. So what you can see now is that the entire T-Ticket Path Peninsula is a low pressure system, and those properties will be connecting to the sewer with grinder pumps. Much of Mara Vista, the higher part of it, is gravity, and then the ends of the streets where the road drops down a bit will be low pressure, and we'll have grinder pumps. There is, at this point, only one property highlighted pink in this map, and the pink is intended to show that the engineers don't know at this point without more evaluation. And it really actually, in the end, will be determined by the property owner's engineer whether they can get there by gravity or by grinder pumps. So there will be some properties where it's not clear at this point in the process whether they can connect to the sewer by gravity or low pressure. So next steps for this project. We'll be sending out a project information letter to all property owners in the sewer area this month. The permits for the project will be complete this month or early July. The permits include, for example, Mass DOT permit for constructing in Route 28. The Conservation Commission, even though this project is all in roadways, some of those roads are within the 100-foot buffer to resource areas. And site plan review by the planning board will happen in the next month. Executing the easements, there are a couple of easements still to complete here on the project, and they are very close, and we expect to execute them in the next month. We will submit the state revolving fund loan application in the next month or month and a half. We are tentatively on the select board meeting agenda for June 30th to talk about betterment policy and grinder pump policy. And I have some preliminary discussion of that in this presentation today. There'll be a public information meeting in July, and I'm stating here that I would appreciate Water Quality Management Committee help with that meeting. And potentially with future meetings like that. There will be a lot of people potentially in attendance, and it might be, I'd appreciate your thoughts ahead of time on the format and the kinds of things that we ought to do in those meetings, and maybe attendance, not of everybody, but of a couple of people to help with answering questions or giving some of the background on the project. We plan to bid the construction contracts in August, and award the construction contract by November. The betterment hearing would happen after the contract is awarded, so by the end of the year in approximately December 2025. I've listed here some later steps, so not immediately next, but part of this is to convey that not all of the public information needs to be conveyed at the same time. There's public information that is most important now at this phase in the project, and there is information that we need to focus on in maybe a year or so. There will be additional public information meetings during construction regarding the sewer connection process and the permitting process. And when I say during construction, I mean as we approach the time where people actually would be able to permit and connect to the sewer would be more appropriate to talk about some of those things. Cost and funding support information and tax credits, and then the information about grinder pumps. Falmouth understands grinder pumps more than they did 10 years ago, but there's, individual property owners will still have questions about how that works. And again, I would appreciate Water Quality Management Committee input and help with additional public meetings. After the construction is complete, which is expected to be November of 2027, the sewer would become available for connection. And property owners are expected to have 1 year after notification to connect to the sewer. So we wouldn't just notify them all at once. We'd be leading up to that, telling them you're going to have a year to connect after that notification. And for some of the bigger, more complicated properties, it might make sense to give more than a year. We'll have to talk about that. Like Falmouth Port is 210 units. Maybe they need more than a year to make those connections. We'll have to see. A little bit of a construction summary for the Great Pond project. It's a 2-year construction timeframe from November 2025 to November 27. The work will be in roadways to install the sewer pipes, and there will be multiple crews simultaneously in roads in different places. There will be, and the construction will go back through the same area a couple of times. So the contractor comes in to put in the sewer main, and then they have a separate crew come back to put in the laterals. And then there's also paving, so the construction moves through the sewer area several times. But it does keep moving for the pipe work, obviously. There's a lift station to be constructed on the Brick Kiln Road site. And the Brick Kiln Road site, as you know, is a town-owned property, and we will be offering that for potential use as a staging area for construction. It has an entrance on the north and the south side, and there's a fair amount of area there. So that could be a staging area for that 2-year project. The work will go year-round. We don't plan to exclude the summertime work except along Route 28. But this, I know we're a summer community, but and a lot of folks are only here in the summer. But this would allow the contractor to continue to make progress, and it's what we did in the last project to get the project done as quickly as we are able. We'll be developing an email list of people interested in updates on this project. So that's one of the things that'll happen at the public meetings is we'll be collecting email information from people so that if they want specific updates, they can get those. We'll also provide during construction weekly project updates to the email list, but also on the town's website, so that people who are interested can see where the construction is, where it will be in the next week. Betterment planning. So as you know, town meeting voted a 70-30 split of the eligible project cost. And at the next select board meeting, we'll be talking about what those eligible project costs are. I've been reviewing the service area with the town assessor. We've been reviewing existing uses and the zoning and potential sewer equivalent units, which we talked about earlier. I've been looking at the old betterment policy and seeing what, if any, modifications need to be suggested to that, and considering fairness and implementability, and that also will be discussed at the next select board meeting. And again, it's along the lines of how do you adjust the betterment charge to properties based on existing and even future potential land use, which can be a challenge, can be a little bit complicated. We will be sending a letter to owners of vacant property listing 3 options. We've done this on the previous projects as well. They'll be paying a betterment for vacant lots, so they can just keep the lot vacant as is, and they'll be charged a betterment for it. So I should say vacant lots that may have development possibility. There are some lots that can be excluded. They're already clearly unbuildable as determined by the building commissioner, and there's some lots that can be excluded. But we'll send letters to all those owners of vacant lots and say, if you merge lots ahead of time, you can reduce the number of betterment charges that you're assessed. If that's, some people own multiple lots, adjacent vacant lots next to one another, and they can also apply a deed restriction in perpetuity stating that the property will never be developed, which may be the case with some of those properties. Being charged a betterment does not guarantee that you can connect to the sewer. You still have to go through the permitting process in the town to get your undeveloped lot developed. So this, I don't believe it makes sense to get into a lot of detail on this map now, but I just wanted to show you the kind of land use evaluation or information that's available. This map shows all residential as blue. I have asked the engineer to highlight for our use the residential properties that are more than a single family, to show those in a different color. Yellow is either town or state owned, so is exempt. Green is open space, I believe, deeded open space. Purple is commercial, and the red is multiple use on the same property. So just to give you an idea of why we need to look at betterment charges for different types of properties. I have another couple of slides which you are familiar with from previous meetings, but because this is a public meeting on television, I'm going to go through them again. So the select board has 3 major betterment steps coming up over the next few years. The first is to vote how sewer equivalent units will be assigned to different types of properties and which project costs are applicable to the betterment. After bids are open, which would be in this fall, the select board will vote an order of betterment assessment, which will include a betterment plan and a list of properties to be bettered, and an estimated assessment per property. That's an estimated assessment. It's based on the bid cost and the known cost at that time, but the cost can go down from that point. It cannot go up after that point. So after the project is complete, which is expected in the fall of 2027, the select board will vote to certify the final SEU value. And as I said, that number cannot be higher than that in the previous order, but it can be lower. And then at that point, it will go on to the collector's office, and it would start appearing on tax bills. So tax bills wouldn't be affected until 2028 at the earliest. The previously estimated range that we've discussed and presented for betterments is $27,000 to $40,000 per sewer equivalent unit, which is expected to be a single-family home. That number will be lower because there will be more than 810 sewer equivalent units, but I don't have that number yet. That will depend on this betterment policy that the select board votes. The betterment cost factors are, of course, the project cost, the number of sewer equivalent units, which costs are determined to be applicable to the sewer area, and the loan forgiveness amount. We now know that we are getting the 25% loan forgiveness from the state, which is a very big help. So that puts us closer to the $27,000 end of this range to start with. That betterment will be paid, can be paid off over 30 years. Property owners can pay it off sooner, but they are allowed up to 30 years to pay it off, and it's at 0% interest if that's the interest rate that the town gets, which is what we expect. So at that cost range, that would be, at the $27,000 to $40,000 total, that betterment value would be about $900 to $1,300 per year. Again, the cost to service area property owners are the betterment, the cost to connect and to abandon their septic system, and then their sewer charges on their water and sewer bill after they're connected. I won't dwell on this now, but there is assistance to sewer service area property owners with their sewer connection cost, and we will have more information about that at any public meetings on this subject. The last thing I wanted to talk about in this presentation is the grinder pump policy. These next few slides are based on the current. I'm just talking about the way I'm envisioning the grinder pump policy moving forward, and it's based on the existing with primarily clarifications. So I am potentially, this is an outline of what I'm imagining recommending to the select board at the end of June. That the town would provide pumps for properties that are single-family residential or residential condo units and developed before the project is closed out. What that means then is that owners, like in the last project, owners of commercial and multifamily or apartment properties and of properties that are developed after the project has been closed out, must purchase and maintain their own grinder pumps. So that's been the policy for the previous project, but it wasn't explicitly stated that clearly in the select board policy. As far as maintenance, as before, I'm imagining that the property owner will own the pump and must protect it from damage due to activity on their property, which is a public information effort that I want to make sure we get out there as well. This is something that comes up every time there's a building permit on a property that has a grinder pump connection. The town, I expect that the select board will vote, but it's up to, this will be discussed at their meeting, that the town would maintain the pumps and continue to reserve the right to charge property owners for maintenance due to misuse of the pumps. For example, dumping plastic toys, clamshells, grease, all kinds of things like that down the sewer line. The town will replace the pumps when necessary. This was the commitment that was made previously. And the property owner would pay for the electricity, which is estimated to be about $50 a year. It's not a lot of money, but I do want to be clear about that up front. The property owner may, so as far as the power outages, the property owner may purchase their own generator. Many people do have a home, have or do buy a whole home generator or a portion of their home generator. The town may continue to provide pump down service during power outages when and where feasible. And I want to be a little more clear about how challenging that can be and the limitations on the feasibility of that. But that is the intent, is to the degree feasible, to provide pump down service for grinder pumps in a power outage. We're also looking at at our options with the control panels to make the service a little easier to coordinate for problems and for when the power is out. So again, that'll be discussed more at the select board meeting on June 30th. So that's a review of the kinds of topics that will be discussed at the select board meeting and in a different way at future public meetings.
Thank you, Amy. Excellent. John?
I guess, Amy, how do you think you're going to go about handling the burden of the cost on the first phase of the project in terms of the lift stations and force mains that you say can be used for later stages of the project? So it seems like there's an element of fairness that a lot of the early stages are getting hit with these upfront costs, but the other people will benefit too. Is there a way to even that out down the extent of the project?
Right, so it's an important question, and that $27,000 cost was based on excluding the lift station and the force mains from the total project cost to be charged to the betterment. So I'd said earlier in this presentation that sewer equivalent units are, maybe I shouldn't be bouncing around in here. I'll go back to the end. The sewer equivalent units are based, you start with the total applicable project cost.
Right.
And so the select board need to vote on whether that's an applicable project cost.
And if they vote no, then that cost is handled
That cost
out.
is removed and is paid for by the town as a whole.
Okay.
And it is not a part of the betterment cost.
What is it as a fraction, just roughly?
It's about approximately half of the construction cost. Not half of the total project cost, but it's half of the construction portion of the total project cost.
Half is the part that clearly is attributable to particular properties, and the other half is the half that maybe should be amortized over two or more different areas.
So what's the ratio of 20? It's like, so it's a little less than 3/4 of the total project cost is applicable to the property, to the bettered properties, and a little more than 1/4 is this lift station and force main. When I said half and half, it's about half of the construction cost, but there are all kinds of other costs that are applicable to the project as a whole, which may or may not be part of
Like what?
Design, grinder pump purchases, police details. I don't have the total project
but,
cost in here,
just as
but
an
yes.
example.
So the select board will have the opportunity to make a determination of which of those pieces of the project cost are applicable to the betterment.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
I think the town of Barnstable has this system, a website where there's an address lookup where you can plug in your address and it'll tell you if you're in a sewer zone or what's required of you. I think with our website. It'd be nice where a homeowner can just plug it in. I know there's going to be letters and other things, but, I mean, the town website should be a really, main source for information. And if they can just plug in their address and they can see, yeah, I'm in the gravity, or I'm going to need a grinder pump. As soon as you know that, it'd be a useful way of letting people have at least a heads up of what's coming their way.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I think Barnstable they have a plan, a bigger plan for for larger parts of town at this point, and so they're probably also able to tell what phase you're in. At this point, unfortunately, this next project is it's a pretty limited sewer area, and I think people can see from a map where, whether they're in that or not.
I think people would rather, I think a lot of people like to, especially some of the older folks who maybe aren't comfortable looking at maps.
Type in your address.
Just type in your address and it tells you what's required. And then you just expand it as the project expands. We know what's going to happen with sewers, IAs, or whatever.
Yep.
It's just a simple way to have it out
That's
there for
a
people.
good suggestion. Hey, I meant to introduce. Chris Syriac is the new Assistant Wastewater Superintendent. Chris is coming from Bellingham and Needham, had wastewater superintendent experience and lots of collection system experience in both of those places. So he's here at the meeting to begin to learn all the players.
Welcome.
He's going to be helping out on these projects.
Has Amy painted that bullseye on your back yet? It's coming.
Tom, do you have any questions?
No, I'm fine. Oh, well, I just congratulate Amy on this. This is so amazing and so complex, and Ken brought up the issue of suddenly what are other costs? Well, there's a big spider web of things running out every direction on different timelines, and it's a small project in the bigger scheme of things.
Yes,
too.
it is.
Yeah.
John?
It's a big project for the town, but there's a lot more going on as well. Yep.
Yeah, I want to second John's suggestion about the website, especially because you have a lot of out-of-town owners who may only be here in the summer and may not want to go to meetings. And there's no, meetings are important and we should work hard on it, but there's no excuse for not having an excellent website.
Yep.
So, there is a lot of information on the website, but we need to get more current information about this project out there and then keep updating it.
Ed?
This is, something that obviously has a lot of complexity. Amy's done a great deal of work and has even more to do going forward. We've got a whole new select board that's never really been through a project like this. We've got a bunch of citizens that have heard some of the things from the history, but a lot of new property owners are involved. So there's an awful lot of things to do, and the big kickoff will be select board in the end of the month, hopefully. As a member of this committee and someone who went through the process in Little Pond and very intimately acquainted with it, anything I can do as a member of the committee and as my experience in it, I'm ready, willing, and able to attend to meetings, help with meetings. So I'm going to be here to help as much as I can. I think this is a great start. I think there's so much more coming. There's so many more, I'm going to say, permutations to the policies. It would build on the history and the policies that worked well for Little Pond, and with some tweaking, I think can work well for this, so that try to learn from that experience and make it an even better and seamless process for those who are going to experience the sewering, the whole thing's about cost. There's been a tremendous amount of misinformation about this project on social media and letters to the editor at town meeting. I remember one town meeting member saying, you're stuck with this betterment. If you sell your house, you got to pay it off. You can't transfer it. Well, actually, you can. I've transferred it twice in my moves from one property to another in Little Pond. I transferred it and assumed another betterment. Banks may not let you do that, but that's the kind of misinformation that's there, and we want to get the message to people. Here are the facts. There's some grossly inflated cost information that's been put in the paper that the actual cost experience was a fraction of what's being stated. $40,000 or $30,000 to connect your house to the street main. No, it's never anywhere near that. The high, I think, was about $7,000 and the low was about $3,000 actual experience connect to the sewer. So we want to counteract that misinformation with outreach like this. This is a terrific start, and there'll be a lot more coming. As far as people attending meetings, summer residents, boy, they're going to want to go to those meetings. They did when Little Pond happened. There was a series of meetings over the summer and into the fall. Website utilization, a lot of the towns have some great website stuff that I'm sure we will be able to copy and learn from. So a lot of things to do. The more people that are going to get involved from this committee, the better, I think. So thanks, Amy, for a great job, and look forward to working some more on this.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to comment on, I think there's a semantic problem in the phrase connect to the sewer. It can either mean the physical connection part, connecting, paying to have the pipe run from your house to the street, or the concept of all the costs involved in having your property be in a sewer district as opposed to an IA or a UD or nothing. So some people, when they say the cost of connecting to the sewer, mean just the physical pipe connection. Other people mean include the betterment.
Right. But, you know, that's an important part of the education. Here is the betterment. Well, the betterment's not eligible for anything except you can spread it over 30 years. You can't use the state tax credit for the betterment, but you can use that up to $18,000 tax credit for your connection costs.
Right.
But historically, those connection costs weren't anywhere near the amount, you know, they weren't anywhere near an $18,000 potential tax credit. And you can only use it for the actual connection, the plumbing, the digging, and the putting the dirt back in place. So if you've got a fancy patio over your septic tank and it's got to be broken up because you got to go down there and break up that septic tank, well, you know, that's not eligible for the tax credit. So those extraordinary landscape costs can be extraordinary. But it's the core connecting and going through the process. Because most people are grinder pumps, it's a lot simpler than what I personally went through, 120 feet of 8 feet deep by 8 feet wide trench running through my property in August. The driest August that we've had, no rainfall whatsoever. It was quite a summer. But you get through it and you learn from it, and people are going to have, I think, a good experience. And anything we can do as, you know, town officials, Amy's spearheading this, and people on this committee, and contractors, plumbers, you know, there's a lot of people to get involved, educated, and on board to this. So we've made a great beginning.
Ken?
So first of all, great presentation. The full range of complexity emerges as you lay this all out. I completely agree with Jonathan on the idea that it would be nice if there was a way individual property owners could go to a town website and see where they stand.
Okay.
So that's something worth putting some time and effort into. I'm picked up on the idea that we have project-eligible costs. That's an important distinction to separate out that general cost of the force main and the lift pumps and so forth, so that the homeowners aren't burdened with something that future projects are going to take advantage of. Do you feel that the selectmen are sympathetic to that? Is there anything this committee specifically should do, any of us, to emphasize that point?
So it's a new select board in several cases. There are several new select board members. And I mean, the previous select board, I certainly heard sympathy or interest in that way of looking at it. I think.
So it might be helpful if we chimed in some way as a committee about that.
Sure. Either before or during that meeting.
Right. And then my last question is construction phase 25 to 27. When do the first connections become operable?
Likely after the end of 2020, or at the end of the project.
At the end of 2027?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the past project, we had 2 sets of availability. I don't think we're going to do that this time. I think we're
Okay.
going to do it all at once.
Oh, I have a question for you. That you must have solved for the Little Pond project, but I don't remember what the solution was. There's the 1-year period for connecting. How do you incentivize people not to procrastinate?
So a couple of things. Some people
Because if you
want
get to the end, then there aren't enough contractors to go around.
That's one thing. Some people want to connect. They have septic system issues, or they just want to get it done, or whatever. So a certain number of people just connect. If the select board is going to have a grinder pump reimbursement again, I will propose that be connected to or contingent on closing out your permits. So one of the issues we had last time was that permits weren't getting closed out, and having that pump reimbursement, getting that money back, being contingent on closing out your permits will help a lot with that. That actually doesn't answer your question specifically, but it is a way of getting people through the process to complete the permitting process. Ultimately, yes, it is advantageous to plan ahead and get these things done sooner so that you're not competing at the last minute and losing chances with the contractor that you most wanted. The last thing is that what we did at the end of the last project was issued fines to the final people who were not connected. That is a last resort, but that is something that we did and we will do again if we need to.
Any questions from the audience? Malcolm?
Malcolm Donald again. I'm curious, if you were aware of all the misinformation that you referenced, why weren't the facts made clear to the sewer unit owners and town meeting members and the general public before town meeting and before the ballot question? That's my first question.
Who are you asking?
You, the committee.
I don't have a ready availability of any error-filled information that we had. You'd have to give us specific.
I'll answer it, because what happens is people don't pay attention. There was a lot of meetings we had talking about this project before town meeting, before the ballot question. A lot of things were published in the Enterprise, but not everybody reads the Enterprise. And if they do, they gloss over, oh God, sewer, they just don't even want to think about it. And people did not avail themselves of the opportunity to attend these meetings, to watch the rebroadcast. They did a few of our earlier meetings on live stream, but now it's just, you can do it on the on-demand. But how many people take advantage of that? So, and town meeting members didn't do their homework. It's unfortunate, but then numbers are thrown around and comments made, and there's no opportunity to address it as it's being given. And there had been some attempts to put correct information into the paper, but again, not everybody's paying attention, not everybody's doing their homework. And that's why I believe it's very important now to reach out directly to those who are going to be impacted by this, the people that are going to have to connect, so that they can ask their questions in a face-to-face forum with breakout sessions and maps and things about the equipment itself, the grinder pump. There were a number of questions raised about that 10 years ago in Little Pond. Nobody knew what the hell a grinder pump was in the town.
Yeah.
And people have to educate themselves. They have to ask the questions. And that's what needs to happen. That has not happened, and people just didn't do their homework. That's my simple answer.
Amy, did you have an answer?
I think what Ed says.
Okay. John?
I think the simple answer to that is the town meeting vote was about 90% in favor of the project, and the election was about 80%. So I think that speaks wonders for how well the town is prepared to go ahead with this project.
Well, that's not exactly the issue, John. The issue, John, is that town, if you had at least 3 meetings and 3 opportunities to correct the misinformation that was out there, and
Do you have some
that didn't
specific
happen.
bit of misinformation that you're alluding to?
No, well, it was brought up by you this evening that there was a lot of misinformation, so I don't know what the misinformation is.
Well, as I stated, there was a town meeting member that was talking about the project and was against it. And one of the things he said is, you're going to be stuck with this betterment. If you want to sell your house, you're going to have to pay off that $30,000 or $40,000. That's not true. But if someone had done their homework, they would have realized that's not how that system works. That's not how betterments work. The information was there. It was done 10 years ago. It was available if someone asked that question ahead of time. Numbers about the cost, that the other example I cited was, it's going to cost you $30,000 or $40,000 to connect your house to the street main. That's not true. The history, it was just discussed, I believe, at our last meeting or the one prior to that, and said, here are the actual costs, averages and extremes of connecting to the sewers for Little Pond. A low of about $3,000 for a grinder pump simple install, and a high of about $7,000 for a complex gravity install, which happened to have been mine. That information was there. People didn't pay attention. They didn't do their homework. They just, I think there was a tendency, Malcolm, to try and throw out anything that might sway voters to go against the project. The project is approved, and as Mr. Waterbury stated, by overwhelming numbers at both town meeting and in the town-wide ballot. It's time to move forward. It's time to make sure people are informed and know what's going on. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to look back at why, when, where, and how. Let's get the correct information. Let's give people the opportunity to ask those questions, whether it's via website, email, coming to these meetings, going to the informational sessions. There were informational meetings I can remember at Little Pond that were extremely heated. People yelling and screaming at Julian Susso, the town manager at the time, a lot of inflammatory things said, and it took a while for people to understand and ask and listen to the answers and realize, okay, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. It can happen. The costs aren't as bad as anybody thought. The complexities aren't as bad. The grinder pumps turned out to be a very, very successful concept. And I myself questioned it as an engineer, said, really? And I became a believer because I educated myself. But I think we want to get the information to the people that need it, want it, and we'll ask those questions. And if they ask the question 3 times, that's okay. I'd be happy to give them the answer 3 times. And if I don't have the answer, I'll make sure I get it for them, if at all humanly possible. That's what we want to do going forward as a town, as a DPW wastewater department, Amy and her new assistant and her management, the town manager, the select board, and members of this committee. Move forward with positive information and correct information. And if somebody's got a concept in mind that's incorrect, ask us. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Why I'm asking the question is that I believe there are going to be more sewer projects proposed down the road, and going forward, it would be very nice if all the misinformation were cleared up before town meeting and before the ballot. My question number 2 is, why weren't property owners informed individually prior to the ballot question? Why is it now, after the sewer's been approved, that now we're going to reach out to those property owners and tell them how much they actually owe?
Amy?
I don't know how much they're going to be.
We are following the process that we followed previously for the betterment. This is not a different process for the betterment than it was last time. And they're just responding to the previous thing. A lot of great information was put out there. There will always be internet discussions that contradict what's going on officially, and we cannot battle all of that, and I don't try. We put the correct information out there, and we make it available on the website, and we do not try to fight battles online. I did want to also just clarify, because it's come up several times, on the betterment, how the betterment is handled at the time of sale depends on the banks, the lending institutions involved. So there's not an absolute answer to that. It varies sale to sale depending on the rules of the lending
The point
institutions.
is that the town
involved.
doesn't block it.
The
Town is not the limiting factor.
Town is not the limiting factor. It is the lending institutions on each side.
Malcolm, could I just address your last question just quickly?
Yeah.
I think going forward for Phase 2 of the Great Pond, I think once we do have a hard and fast map, and we know the residents that are going to be out there, I think we can improve and make sure that on the website, again, whatever system we use, that people will know, as soon as it's possible to know when the final sewer map is drawn. And I agree, we should get that out right away so there's no surprises for anybody. Everybody knows what's coming down the pipe if they're going to be affected by it.
Well, I contend that there's going to be a lot of surprises now that the ballot question's been passed, and now that people are going to be notified as to what expenses they're going to be liable for. And it seems to me that even if you were following the last protocol, it doesn't mean that the last protocol wasn't flawed as well, as far as notifying individual owners as to what their expected costs were going to be prior to the ballot question. So they would be educated voters, and yeah. I don't know, but that's, yeah. And then number 3 goes along with that also, is why weren't public meetings held before town meeting and before the ballot question? Why?
They certainly were. I mean, every precinct has a public meeting prior to town meeting at which questions are addressed.
Yeah, but, yeah, that's, in my precinct meeting, all of about 15 minutes were devoted to the information about the sewer.
Plus, there have been many meetings of this committee, which you and others have attended, but you represent a tiny fraction of the population. Some people choose not to inform themselves.
Yeah, well, why do you think they're going to want to inform themselves now that there's a sewer coming in? Don't you think people are going to be mighty upset?
Malcolm, I think you've made your point. I think we have to move along to other issues.
Great. So going forward, if there is another sewer project, I would propose that you do these 3 things that I've asked then. Thank you.
Matt.
Good evening, Matt Hanley from Thomas Landers Road. I'm not going to get into the saying arguments that Malcolm made, but, I did also have some concerns. But also I do have concerns as a member of the East Falmouth Village Association. These zero interest loans, is that just, can anyone tell me if is that just for homeowners, or will businesses, especially be able to apply for those loans as well? The zero interest loans.
Amy, go.
So what we talked about, so there are two things that we talked about at 0%. One is the betterment. The betterment payment is at 0% interest to the town over 30 years, and that's for anybody who's paying the betterment, whether they're a homeowner or not. The county loans have a number of criteria, and they're not available to all. So I would have to defer to the county on what their rules are for those loans. They're not available. They have criteria based on income and on seasonality, and so I doubt they would apply to commercial, and they will not apply to all residential.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I grew up in Falmouth, and there's some old family businesses in this section, like the Great Bay Hotel, and the Clipper Ship Apartments, Cedar Meadows Apartments. These family businesses, are going to be impacted by this. They're going to have more than just a regular SE, not just one sewer equivalent unit. They're going to have multiples, and some of these like developments like the Clipper Ship Apartments and Cedar Meadow Apartments, those are affordable housing units, and those management companies are gonna be forced to put that betterment back on their rent, and so, these are like some of the concerns that I've been bringing up, for a long time, and I think they really should be paid attention to. And I don't think it's fair that the town's properties are getting a free ride. They're exempt. Amy said the Falmouth Public Schools building, which is a big municipal building that has toilets for the ball fields and for all the staff members in that building. Is that building getting zero payment? They're not paying any assessment?
Correct. No town no town property would pay a betterment because the money to pay that would come from the town. It'd be the town paying itself. So there's no...
The equivalent of changing the betterment percentage to 69% or 71%.
Well, that's just schematics. You could say, the force mains aren't going to be on the betterment. The pumping stations aren't going to be on the betterment. This structure is not going to be on the betterment, so we could assume, the taxpayers of Falmouth could assume that structure and what they're contributing, the amount of sewer equivalent units of that structure would be assumed in this larger infrastructure portion, so the betterment is reduced for the homeowners, the single-family homeowners, and for the businesses.
70-30 split is already arbitrary.
Well, 70-30 of the betterment, not the greater project.
The fact that the betterment is 70% and not 75 or 65 or 100 or 0.
Well, those numbers need to be discussed as a town.
Yeah, so
I don't want to get in an argument with the board. I'm just saying, as a town member and with someone that grew up in East Falmouth and as a business owner in East Falmouth, these are questions that need to be answered, and I feel it's only right to raise these issues in front of this board and in front of the newspaper's representative to say, these things need to be addressed.
I hear you made your point.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the purview of this committee. I suggest
No,
you
it would
approach
be the
the
select board.
board.
Yeah.
Right, can I make a comment on that? I think Matt brings up a very good point about some of the affordable housing developments in that, within the sewer service area. And if the costs are going to be burdensome, that might be another way that the selectmen could partition costs or think about some subsidy that might help with that. I think you raise a good point there.
Yeah.
I'll say that in the previous project, there were several large, lower income or reduced income properties there. The Tattakit Apartments was in the last sewer project, and they were assessed a regular betterment, a standard betterment, based on sewer equivalent units. We did charge 0.25 or a quarter of an SEU per bedroom for those, which ends up being a lower cost for them than it would be for single-family homes per unit, because many of them have it's basically a single-family home. What am I trying to say? That it's that a larger apartment building may be many more units with fewer bedrooms. So it is on average, a lower betterment per unit, but it is still 0.25 SEU per bedroom was what was charged last time, and I would likely be what would be charged this time of any apartment rental. The apartments, and do also think that the apartments contribute a larger share of nitrogen load to the water body and benefit from the sewer connection.
I appreciate the information, and I'm going to attend the rest of the meetings and ask these, to the select board and the appropriate groups. I just want to bring it to this board's attention, because I know everyone on the board tries to gather as much information, and maybe you haven't thought of this previously, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Hilda?
I have a comment, but not on this topic.
Oh.
It's related to meetings. I'll have a meeting related to this, yeah.
About, oh,
Public meetings, there was a lot of discussion.
go ahead.
I want to make a Hilda Menge, Hatchville. I want to make clear that even though your meetings are public, it's not the same as a public meeting. They're very different. So before the town meeting, or before especially the ballot question, I asked everybody who I met if they knew what was on the ballot question, if they understood the whole wastewater thing. And I found not a single person who could explain it to me. I asked a town meeting member who was also on the finance committee if he could give me a short overview, like a one-pager, explaining exactly this whole sewer project, so that I could give it to people so that they would understand it. It took him 2 weeks of research to get back to me. And so it took me a lot of phone calls and a lot of work to get to it. And he gave me a pretty good one, but not a one page that I could use to hand out. So that's my background. But what really stands out here is that in December 4th, Steve Rafferty mentioned in a meeting, and I'll read you what he said. Having worked out all through the geoboundaries for months on end, it is a good time for all of us, particularly for anybody watching at home on TV, to really understand the overall program, what we have been doing, what we are at, where we are at, and where we might be going. And I think that Jonathan's, he had just given you a presentation, has been doing a great job. As we move forward in the first year of the year, I look forward to doing quite a bit more outreach rather than just these every 2-week meetings. Steve Rafferty said we should be doing a lot of public outreach. That never happened. Several committees then also discussed the importance of Jonathan Kaufman's presentation and said we should make plans to give this to the public. And there was a lot of discussion, what kind of presentation? Should it be long? Should it be short? Should it be 3 phases, whatever? And I thought something would happen. Nothing happened. So the public meetings you are all aware of is different than this, because the day after the town had voted yes to the sewers, this meeting was the day after, and you said, now it's time for us to give public meetings. So you all know the difference between these meetings and public meetings. And I want just to make clear, because there were no public meetings like we should have in each school. Have a public meeting where people could ask questions so that these misunderstandings would not happen. Those never happened. And that is really upsetting to the public. Because I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to people, scientists. Not a single person could answer these questions. Not a single one. Woodwell Institute, MBL, Oceanographic, the people who delivers to my house, everyone I asked, do you know what's on the ballot? Do you understand what's on the ballot? Do you know what's going to happen? Not a single one. And that's not right.
Thank you. Reports of members and staff. Tom.
Yes, Maggie McGaw is here. She circulated, she's the author of the letter that circulated to the committee earlier this week about recent, ongoing, and perhaps future events in LaQuoit Bay. And I just want to give you a heads up that we're hopefully going to have some input from Webner on the 25th, the meeting 3 weeks from today. I hope everybody read Maggie's cry of distress. I don't know what else to call it. It was pretty bad. I hope everybody saw some of the pictures. Was it yesterday you were out and things had dissipated? Some wind-driven circulation or something probably. But I just wanted to bring that to people's attention, and if you haven't read her letter, please read
You're
it.
referring to the fact that there was a massive algal bloom in the
Yes.
Bay.
Yeah.
That caught my attention.
Yeah.
Wait a second, Mel. Maggie, did you want to say something?
was just, should I?
Yeah.
If you want to.
Your chance at the spotlight.
Maggie McGaw, Waquoit, and a member of the Board of Citizens for the Protection of Waquoit Bay, on whose behalf I drafted that letter, and also a letter to the editor of the Enterprise. So the algal bloom, the algal mats were first reported on May 15th as having been seen on May 14th. And then I went out sailing on the 27th, and that was the first time I saw them. And they extended east to west across the bay, and from just right about Metoxet Point down to Great River. So it was an astounding expanse of algae. The same expanse of algae was also observed 2 days later. Then we had the weekend of high winds. I went out yesterday, I looked at the Municus. There is still significant amounts of algae on the Municus, both north of the Meadow Neck Bridge and south. And then the only other place I found anything that looked like a mat was tucked in behind the dock at the town landing off of Seapit. I went to Metoxet Point. I went to the end of Seacoast Shores. I went out to...
Well, Maggie, we've got only 15 minutes left.
Sorry.
Are you proposing something specific? We don't need the specifics of every piece of algae.
We'll be here for a very long time.
My proposal, or my my
don't go
cry, as Tom says, is that the WQMC really prioritize taking steps of all possible kinds to improve the conditions in Waquoit Bay.
And we are hoping to get a status report from the Webner people in 3 weeks.
Is that letter on the town website?
No, not yet. It will be in a version of it will be in the Falmouth Enterprise.
Apparently, it will be in the Enterprise.
So why is it on the website?
This just happened.
This just happened. We just received it.
The developing story, as Katie would say.
Earl.
Earl Barnhart, Green Center. I would like to correct some incorrect information that was presented at this meeting on May 21st, the last meeting. There were two things that were presented that were incorrect. One was a statement that said that Mass DEP would not allow urine diversion to be an optional alternative in a situation where an IA septic system is mandated. This has been stated several times publicly. That is not true.
You're right, it's not true.
It's not true. In the Mass DEP approved CWMP, there's a statement that says eco-toilets in watersheds where IA septic systems are the recommended solution for TMDL compliance, property owners will also be able to select eco-toilets that achieve the same level of nitrogen removal as is required for an IA system. It's in the approved Mass DEP Falmouth CWMP. Now, the reason this was stated is that the second false assumption was stated that the effectiveness of UD probably won't be as high as an IA septic system. That was stated as an assumption or an opinion. It is not based upon any facts. The actual facts are that the best IA systems are thought to remove 90% of total nitrogen. And there's a conference in November of the IA people that stated that and gave evidence for it. The other point is that in the 2014 eco-toilet demonstration program in Falmouth, the best performing eco-toilets have been shown to remove 90% of total nitrogen, exactly the same amount. I think it's quite possible that a person could make the case that the best urine diversion would be equal to the best IAs and have the authority and the permission to choose that instead.
Thank you. Any other reports of members?
I was just going to say, I'm a newly elected Precinct 3 town meeting member, and that's obviously impacted by the sewers. I'd like to join your support group that will reach out to the community. Yeah. You said you're looking for water quality members to support the effort, and since I represent those people that are impacted by Phase 1 and soon to be Phase 2, then I'd like to help out. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You all set on, John?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Reports of members and staff.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would comment on is that I just, in Little Pond sampling, and I noticed an unusually large amount of floating algae as well, and I'm wondering if some larger process is going on out there that's stimulating blooms this particular year. Climate, something from offshore, who knows?
Are these brown algae? Are these brown algae?
Minutes of prior meeting?
Wait.
Go.
We got an email from Pond Watch Program. They are looking for volunteers for sampling this summer. They are short a couple of teams, especially on Green Pond, and they're looking for somebody who has boat access or people who are interested in volunteering. So if you know anybody, send them our way and send them their way.
Anything else? I apologize.
So that was it.
Minutes of prior meeting? No.
Amy, did you want to? I'm sorry, Steve, I just saw Amy.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you for raising that, Kristen. So the sampling group, the Pond Watchers, reached out to me today because they are low on samplers. They're missing somebody for Vineyard Sound and for, as you said, Green Pond. They were also looking for help in West Falmouth Harbor. So if anybody's interested in sampling, or anybody who may be watching is interested in joining the Pond Watchers and helping out with sampling, they can email Kristen or myself, Kristen Rathjen, with the Water Quality Management Committee, or Amy Lowell, the wastewater superintendent, and let us know.
So it's 4 sampling dates, and it's mornings. It's 2 sampling dates in July and 2 in August. That's the commitment.
Oh, and before I go to the minutes, I have a tiny report on the urine diversion. The Mass Test Center received a $400,000 grant from DEP to do the urine diversion project.
Oh, excellent.
It's huge.
Yeah. Just back on the previous topic, can you remind me where the Vineyard Sound Station is? Is it? Oh.
Not exactly.
It's within sight of land, though.
It's between Green Pond and Great Pond, I think.
Oh, way over there, okay.
It's either that or it's between,
Yeah, I remember looking at the map, I can't remember.
Let's continue that.
Well,
That's
yeah,
a technical detail for whoever is actually doing it. Minutes of the prior meeting? Any corrections other than the professional ones by Tom?
Semi-professional today.
I move they be approved as distributed.
Second?
I'll second. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we have a motion on item 6
So moved.
to,
Adjourn.
is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.